This nigga really had a diabolical foot fetish.
10 times Jeanette McCurdy tried to warn us about Dan Snyder. I'm sure you know about Jeanette McCurdy, the teen star of iCarly, one of the most iconic shows of our childhood. You'd recognize her by the character of Sam in iCarly, who would play Miranda's best friend. Jeanette joined the show when she just had entered teenage years around 2007. By 2012, Jeanette quit the show because of Dan Snyder, because he was involved in some horrifying things. Jeanette described her leaving the show because the show's producer, Dan Snyder, had created a toxic work environment and made her feel
He looked like a freak. He looked like a freak.
uncomfortable. Of course, we'll tell you what was happening all along because it goes deeper than you may imagine.
It's the thing that I feel the most shame of in my entire life. I do not like any of the acting work that I have ever, like any of the projects that I've been a part of as an actor. And even talking about it, honestly, my heart starts to race and like I feel like I almost could cry.
To make it worse, Jeanette was only a teenager at this time, and it definitely seemed to have impacted her mental health immensely. Let's get started. The show itself seemed like something really harmless for a young audience, but that was only limited to its appearance. Most of us watched iCarly when we were kids and had no idea what was actually being insinuated during that time. Have a look now and then. Hear what Jeanette McCurdy has to say about it and you'll actually be surprised. Dan Snyder was accused of exploiting little teenage girls and having a foot fetish. There's nothing really wrong with having a foot fetish, but involving underage girls in your fetish, I mean, it's a little weird to have a foot fetish, but that just doesn't mean they should be canceled for it.
That nigga is nasty for that. I ain't gonna lie. Having teenage girls do that? Freaked out.
But involving underage girls in your fetishes and pouring that mentality all over the show has to be called out for being absolutely disgusting. Kennedy was nominated for the Young Actors Award and stood out as an author for the Wall Street Journal. That is around the time Jeanette was maturing and started to feel wary of what was happening to her. And guess what? Ever since Kennedy wrote about it, dozens of girls came forward to back Kennedy's claims and spoke about their experiences. You may be wondering how a brand like Nickelodeon responded to this. They simply ended their contract, with which was revealed after the company's team met with Snyder. They posted a public statement after this, and I'm going to read it out. Following many conversations together about next directions and future opportunities, Nickelodeon and our long-term creative partner Dan Snyder have agreed not to extend the current deal. Without further ado, I'd like to start by showing you some of the scenes from the show that will leave you startled. Before watching these videos,
it's just crazy because you will never pay attention to this stuff.
Keep in mind that this young girl was not even 18 years old yet and was only doing this as she did not know any better. However, Dan Snyder knew everything as he was the man behind all these suspicious scenes. Here you go. The actress in this clip wasn't even being paid enough to get exposed to such disgusting mentality at her young age. The incoming clips that you will see show you why Dan Snyder was imposing his foot fetish on young teen shows. Ever since Nickelodeon decided not to continue their work with someone who had been part of the network for so long, things got more interesting. There were debates about the guy's character as his wife decided to end their relationship as well. Tweets were found by people on Dan Snyder's account where he was posting pictures of actresses' feet and even his own photos with those underage girls. Pick: Carly tickles Sam's very unusual toes. If you have a moment, will you name Sam's toes for us? This guy then proceeds to post pictures of the young actress's feet, who probably
What the fuck? Put him under the jail, man.
had no idea what was even being said about her. This is just one of the controversial photos on social media and fingers pointed at Dan Snyder. However, back then, no one knew what else was going to be digged up. Of course, platforms like Twitter and Facebook were not nearly as widespread back then as they are now, so it took months, if not years, for Dan Snyder to get fully exposed for his indecent acts. Dan even urged girls who would watch the show to post their own pictures as well. Not enough adults saw those tweets back then, and most of them who did were not following the show as closely. Your entire perspective will change when you watch how he continued to involve these young actresses in his fetishes just to satisfy himself. Okay, so the scene from the breakfast show was reenacted here, and the entire episode was appropriate except for this part.
This nigga really had a diabolical foot fetish. This is diabolical.
Tori says that she has a secret talent to shoot a bow and arrow with her feet. Of course, Dan introduced this out of nowhere, but you'll get it as the video moves forward. It definitely gets more bizarre when you see the kids rolling on the floor laughing, and one of the guys, Rob, ends up with his face on Tori's stomach. Then Rob blows on her stomach by awkwardly pushing Tori's shirt up. That was the most awkward scene I have seen in a while, and I'm sure you're wondering just like me if there was any need for that. Now you can probably start to understand why Dan Snyder does not work at Nickelodeon anymore. The thing is that Dan has some super crazy obsession with feet. Although I could talk—
Wait, who was the Redskins owner? Ain't that Dan Snyder too? Or I thought these were the same people, bro. I thought these were the same people. I was about to say this dude is terrorizing football and feet. Crazy.
For hours against feet, guys, but that's not the reason it's inappropriate. The fact that these girls were not at a legal age is what makes this worse. You will notice that in this clip as well, Dan has made the actors do funny stuff with their feet, which just reflects his obsession. Basically, the guy is just pouring ketchup on Tori's feet at first. There are several seconds of video of just Tori twirling her feet around, which they're dripping in ketchup. Now that you've seen the clip, was there anything funny about that? Because being a comedy show, it's supposed to be funny. And if it's not funny, then there aren't many reasons why Dan engineered a scene as awkward as this. People have commented on how they feel terrible for the actresses and the actors who have had to put up with this.
Tried to get your whole big toe in your mouth? Check this out.
Hey, yo, lock this nigga up immediately, bro. Immediately. He got little kids sucking their own toes, taking that shit back home and probably beating the fuck out of this shit. This is nasty.
In this scene, Kat is being exploited by Dan Snyder as he made her try and fit her foot in her mouth. Pouring ketchup on a young girl's feet might be creepy, but demanding a young actress shove her feet down her throat is outright disgusting. If you watch the rest of the episodes, it becomes very clear that these scenarios had absolutely nothing to do with the main part of the show. There was no reason for Kat's character to go to her room, close the door, and record herself while she tries to bite her feet and do other questionable things. Twitter has spoken up about how Dan should be prosecuted for forcing his inappropriate thoughts on young girls. As the show progresses, the actors and actresses get more disengaged with it. They were starting to grow up and see why Dan Snyder was making them do these things. They have talked about how they dismissed it as goofy humor back when they were kids. However, having to accept the fact that they had been exploited for years on end has been difficult for some of these young women. For Nickelodeon to only take action once the word has spread all over the internet was quite astounding. It is being argued that networks as huge as Nickelodeon should have played a more responsible role in this situation. But that's all we have for this video. Do share your thoughts on this situation and let us know why you think Dan Snyder was able to get away.
That nigga is nasty.